So part two. These are broader, like cultural-based changes. There are more things that are have a little bit more about how a GM rules on things and how a GM wants to run things. They're not necessarily like things that have to get voted on exactly. They're just more like whether players like the feel of these things and if the GM then wants to implement them. So one of them is that negative mana should affect things like undead and golems. Currently, they don't get insanity, so there's no disadvantage to being at negative mana, and I think there should be. So I think that undead and golems and things should like start to have negative effects, like their limbs should stop working or they should start glitching and stuff. And that makes them a little more not want to necessarily just spend themselves to negative mana all the time and then end encounters at negative mana. So that I think is a good incentive. The backstory power level is currently kind of high. There's a bunch of fixes listed here. I think that's really simple, actually. Most of the things we're already doing are gonna kind of fix that, I think. So if you read this over, you'll see that. I think tradecrafts should be silent, basically not in-game knowledge. So currently we have a rule that if you ever call a thing, everyone knows that you're using that thing. And that's just because, metagaming-wise, people probably would. But I think we're kind of asking a little too, we're not asking enough of our players to like have to imagine the game, and instead of playing it like it's mechanical, we want them to play it like it's a real world. So if somebody comes up to you and uses Courtier, we don't want them to be like, oh, you're using Courtier, I must respond in this mechanically, I'm friendly to you way, but I know you're courtiering me, so now I'm hostile to you because I don't like being courtiered, which is a little bit strange, rather than what we're trying to imply with courtier is that I'm just someone who's good at communicating with people and making them generally comfortable and happy. So that would probably transfer to that people generally like this character more. So making them silent also buffs them, because it means that people who focus a lot in the tradecraft sphere of like diplomacy and gesture or scribe, things like that, people don't necessarily know those things are being done out of game, and so that gives them kind of an upgrade, I would say, which is nice, I think. Moving on down, I want to try to add descriptions of how each ability works, like what hack actually does, like describe that somewhere in a document somewhere, and that way then GMs can have a better time or an easier time rather describing or ruling on things when they happen. Because if hack is like, if they think of it as hack as you tag someone and some like magical energy goes into the person's arm and now it doesn't work, that's one version of how hack works. But I often think of hack much more as like, you've cut deep into the bone and you hit the bone, it's maybe broken, or there's a tendon cut, that's why the limb doesn't work. It's just very like realistic in terms of like, that's why it is, not because of a magical effect, but because of a physical effect. That implies things about the game, like how could it get fixed, how long would it take. It makes a GM, gives a GM more information on how to rule on things. Okay, so further on down here, time jumps. I like the idea of time jumps giving players stored years prep, which is just a unit of, you can think of it like energy that characters would just now have. If the time jumps is say 20 years, then your character has 20 years of stored prep for their next year, and then they can use those years prep as costs for things. They can make like an elder sorcery and say, I'm using 15 years prep on this elder sorcery. I'm like, oh well, that's going to be powerful elder sorcery because you basically used up 15 years of preparation for this spell. That's a lot. And then of course those costs would be worked into time jumps, which means that if you are trying to do a lot of things during your time jump, you don't have any years of prep because you spent it all on goals and other things you were trying to get done over your time jump. You could instead say, no, I don't want to spend it all on goals. I want to save it up so I have it to use during the year. And it makes more sense than why characters can do all the stuff they can do during this 1 year, but then can't over this 20-year time span, which is a little bit breaks our suspension of disbelief. Similarly, I want to bring in a cost called uses per year. This is just where things can have a cost that is how many uses you have per year. Like you have 3 uses of this per year, or you have 2 uses of this per year, or cumulative cost per year. Like Oracle might have a cumulative cost per year. The first time you use it, it's 0 in the year, and then the second time that year you use it is 1, and so on. And this could fix things like Oracle and snapcasting and room weaving, and it goes on, with the things that kind of gum up the GM's time. And I want those things to be serious. I want the people who have those abilities to be taken seriously, and I don't want them to have to be rushed or kind of or the power that they have be walked over by a GM who says, I just don't have time to keep running all these things. And I also don't want players to feel like they should just keep trying to do their ability. It eats up at the game. So we need to fix there. Going last down here, there's a party size. I tried doing like a 2/3 of the party is characters and 1/3 is monsters. It feels like it should work, but it often doesn't work just because it almost never really is 2/3. It's very hard to get that ratio to happen naturally, whereas half and half is a little easier. So I'm shooting for that the party size should be closer to half of the group that's present, because it gives the GM a little more flexibility with the monsters and how they design the encounter. So I'm shooting for that. I may try out more of the of other situations, but it's really just, unless the GM specifically says 2/3 is fine, like it should always be, we can only take about half the people that we've got, or a little more than half if you have a lot of helpers. New sash formats is in here. This is stuff you guys probably already know. Like we're doing 2 gray sashes for really big creatures. We're doing some other different sashes we've added in my leagues for item spirit haunts and other stuff like that. Returning to encounters, I'm giving an update. It's really just a clarification that like a centaur can come back after 2 minutes, but they don't have to like decide I'm coming back and then wait 2 minutes. It's really, if they leave, then if it's been 2 minutes, they can just decide whenever they want to come back at that point. So they don't have to like say, I want to come back now and then start a timer. They just leave and then start a timer, and then if it's been 2 minutes, they can come back in the 20 count. Similarly, I think that anybody should be able to return after about 5 minutes in the same way. That way they don't have to keep asking the GM, can I come back? How much time would it take? All that kind of stuff. There's some stuff in here about also if you're running a dungeon, which is just some advice, like how to use this running away mechanic. I think languages should take longer to learn. I think that 5 levels of scribe is too easy to get for like being fluent in a language. It also breaks down some of the game mechanic things, because if you can learn a language that quickly, then sometimes some of the plot comes apart because it's just not realistic when you encounter a new culture, and it takes away some of the role playing. So I think you should have to take longer to do that. We need to call silver and magic all the time. It's in the rules to do that, but we just don't. It's kind of a mouthful, which is kind of too bad, but technically if you can turn off the silver damage and turn off the magic damage when you're calling it, certain monsters can't be played correctly. And so if we rule that you can just do that, you can just decide not to swing silver and not to swing magic, then some monsters just need to get rewritten, and that's fine. GMs just need to know that, and then they can rewrite their critters so that they can respond to that mechanic in the game. I found that in combat, it's baddies really should announce that what they are to the players, instead of players asking, what do I see? Some players were saying this would be a lot easier, and we tested it. It did seem to work. And also saying what you are seems to work better, rather than saying I look like a lanky thing and describing and all that. That's cool, and I like that, but not in combat. If combat's going on, it's easier to say I'm a war troll and then like deal with that at that point. Players can make better decisions about who to attack, who to avoid. If you're just sort of strolling up, having a conversation, then sure, describe yourself, But if you're in battle, don't describe yourself. Say what you are. Alternate species. Some people like to play, Baruch, Coben, Franks, things like that. And I've ruled that it feels like this should be a mod to do that, but the mod should be chosen before you roll your backstory. So you just say, I'm using up my mod, I'm going to be a Coben, now I'll roll my backstory, and I don't get a mod. And then you have to have enough build to do that. So if you roll a backstory that doesn't have enough build, then you got to add flaws. Alternatively, if you roll a backstory that actually has extra build, then you might rule that you can do like a very small mod. So there's going to be a cap of 5 levels that can be gained per month for each Rokron League. By each league, I'm talking about Thursday League, which also connects to the Saturday up in the North Bay, and then Wednesday League, which connects to one of the Saturdays down in Palo Alto, and then I've decided to connect adult and club, and so that's basically 3 kinds of locations that we'll be playing next year. So you can only gain 5 levels on your character in a month. For the extra levels you would be gaining, you're supposed to then find other players who need levels, who haven't reached that cap yet, and help them gain levels with your levels and help them assist in recovering their levels. You can also save up those stored levels so that when you lose a level, you actually can refill it immediately. And that keeps everybody kind of at a party level that's more solid and makes us feel more like a team and less like, there's a star who's like doing everything and then a bunch of people are like struggling to keep up. And I like the feel of we're a party and not as much like I'm this one really powerful person. Lastly, players in Rokron leagues are only going to be able to keep 6 characters from previous years. So, like right now, you probably have a bunch of characters, and you'll need to pick 6 that you're like, these are the 6 that I want to keep being able to take actions with or maybe play next year. The rest of them need to be let go of. They're all NPC'd, and they're gone into the game world, and they're not something we track anymore. There's a note here that this doesn't mean characters that you're making next season. So you have 6 that are stored, and then you can make as many during the year as the GM lets you make. It's just that then at the end of that year, you're going to have to pick 6 again and then go forward. So you always have 6 that stay, and the rest all go, and that just allows us to keep moving through and not feel like, we can't make more characters because we're getting flooded with too many characters to track. And it allows the GM to really focus on your character, so you're not feeling like, I have so many characters and the GM kid doesn't even know what all of them can do. They easily get mixed up, and so it's nice to have fewer and more detail about those characters. They feel more like real heroes. It does need to include characters that have like played 2 seasons and you don't play them anymore, and you're just like, well, they're just permanently retired. Can I just hold on to them? No, they also have to go unless you want to keep them. Like put them in your 6 group if you want. But then you can't. They don't have no more seasons on them. So you're like, I just really like this character. They've played their 2 seasons. I just want to be able to keep doing things and taking actions with them, and keep doing stuff with them. Or that's fine. But then they take up one of your 6 slots. All right, that's it. At the bottom, there's an area there for where like if as we go through the time these next couple of weeks, somebody comes up with some new things. And they're like, oh, I really think we overlooked this. We need to bring this in. Then I'll put that at the very bottom so you can find it. All right, I hope this was helpful. And I hope you can look over all this and discuss it a lot with your friends and discuss it online, discuss it in person, test it out with each other if you want. And the next couple of events in these next couple of days, this week, next week, we're going to be testing all these things as much as we can at events and play testing them, just running battles with them, simulations, everything, and getting a lot of data that we can on them so we know if they work, if they don't work, how to tweak them. And then by September, we should know if we're going to use them or if they're not, they're going to go. All right, thanks a lot. That's it.